This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Today's episode of the Motor City Sports Rant is brought to you by The Athletic, premium coverage for passionate Detroit sports fans. Listeners of this podcast can save 30% off the first year of an annual subscription by going to theathletic.com/DSP. That's theathletic.com/DSP to become a subscriber and save 30% off the price.
Detroit is the greatest! Straight up light you on fire for a Coney dog right now.
Darren McCarty comes back to Neiman in front of him. McCarty draws. McCarty in. McCarty scores! A magnificent goal! Darren McCarty!
Stafford takes, throws, end zone, Calvin, touchdown, Detroit Lions!
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Motor City Sports Rant on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Happy Father's Day, belated Father's Day to all you fathers and father figures and grandfathers, everybody out there. Your job is probably one of the most underrated in all the world, is being a good dad.
Jason, are you feeling underappreciated? Are you saying that you need more love as a dad? I know that it's one of your first Father's Day with your kid. Having a good time.
That at all. I'm not saying
did you have a good time with him?
I'm just, yeah, of course I did. Father's Day was actually spent it with my dad and my brother. We're all fathers now, and we got some breakfast and we caught a movie. We went and saw Solo, something that we all hadn't seen yet. It was a good movie, and then came home and hung out with the kid pretty much the rest of the day, and it was a good time.
Man, it was hot though. My goodness, 95 degrees, a little bit warm.
These past 2 days have been god awful hot.
Is it wrong to complain about the heat? I know a lot of people complain and say, well, you're not supposed to do that. You know, we've gone through a brutal winter. It's not right. But, man, it was tough. So I spent the day at the pool for the most part.
I think it just happens. I know for me personally, there are some people who they're like, oh, I love the cold, or, I love the heat. And I waffle. I'm not going to lie, because there's a point in the winter when I'm just like, I will take 95 degrees and muggy over this any day of the week. And then in the summer, I will say I'm done with the heat. Give me 10 degrees and, a foot of snow. So I think it's just being a part of being a Michigander.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's kind of wrong to complain because there are options. I mean, you can go hang out in air conditioning. There's a lot of pool options, a lot of lakes around these parts. So you have options to stay cool. But, man, it was tough to kind of
That's why they call
there,
Michigan the land of 1,000 lakes.
Yes, sir. All right. Have you had a chance to peek into the surging Detroit Tigers? I think it's exciting. And stay tuned. I might have a take that many people might not have. I'm excited to watch game in and game out because of the fact that with each contest, with each game, the Tigers go out there and play. Granted, it's against garbage teams like the White Sox, where I think they're 8 or 9-1 this year against them. But go out there, look, don't complain about who you're playing. Look, if the White Sox are tanking, if the White Sox are throwing a garbage product out there, go out there and defeat them. Nothing wrong with the sweep. It's nice to see the Detroit Tigers go out there and handle their business. Only one game under 500, 36 wins, 37 losses, 2.5 games back of the division. I know it puts Alavila and the Tigers in a tough spot because, in essence, most people did not believe this was going to be the case. They kind of felt like the Tigers were going to do a bunch of losing. You got a bunch of new pieces, but they've come together. And you have to credit Ron Gardenhire for what he's doing. It's made it for a fun season. We're watching every game, and it's exciting.
Watching every game?
I'm watching every game.
You're sitting down at 7 o'clock. Hey, you got to tune into that Detroit Tigers versus Chicago White Sox.
Now, I'm not tuning in for the entire 3 hours, but I'm peeking into the starters a little bit around crunch time. I'm looking at different players like Nick Castellanos, Candelario, Jacoby Jones, Fires, Liriano, in his stint in the minors. You just peek into it because of the fact that, hey, they're surprising everybody. I feel like they're the feel-good story of Major League Baseball, and Ron Gardenhire has continued to elevate his stock. I mean, many people felt like he was a decent manager, but what he's done with this team, I feel like we can start the process of saying, look, not being buyers, but maybe not being sellers either. Just standing pat this year and do all the selling in the offseason.
Come on, John. The most interested I've been about this team this year is when that goose came on the field. And I think the whole rally goose, it's great for the team. And I love I'd love to get a rally goose shirt. I'm sure some of our compatriots might have some ties for that. But you said it. They're 36-37. That's exactly what did I say at the beginning of the year? I said they're going to be a roller coaster team, and they're going to be about 500. And that's exactly where they are. And I don't know how you're like super excited about this.
I'm excited because I would have said at the 80 game mark, I felt they probably would have been along the lines of like 20, 25 wins. They got 36 of them.
I told you this
10
was
game
gonna
improvement
happen, though.
That's good. That's
John, I told you this.
They got
you didn't
talent.
listen to me.
But wouldn't
you always
say,
tell me to listen to you, and this is Doc's predictions. It's going to happen, and you never listen to me. And I told you they're going to be 500.
But Jason, this is also happening with a key component, a key guy, a major component of that team going out. When Miggy was hurt with that torn bicep, and it was revealed that he was going to be gone for the year, you would say, okay, maybe they'd start a swoon. But it seemed like it has invigorated them, and they play better. And not only
because it really affected when he played so well last year, right? Right? He played really well last year, right?
No,
he had his worst season statistically.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's the difference from last year?
So you're saying that you're okay with Miggy being gone. You're like, you know what? This is something that you would expect them to be better without Miggy because of the fact that his production's down.
I'm not saying that I would expect them to be better, but what I'm saying is he's getting older. That's a fact. Barring I think he would really need to change his game. He would need to look at what David Ortiz did when he was in Boston, where he's going to have to go to all DH and really try and get some of the power back that we know Miguel Cabrera has. Otherwise, this is what we're going to get for the rest of however long that contract is, and it's going to be painful to watch.
What I'm saying is the atmosphere that's being talked about is something that is really exciting, meaning that the guys are having fun, they're coming in, they're playing really hard, their mistakes are being corrected, and you're getting contributions from guys that you didn't think you would get contributions from. Fires, Liriano has been effective. Now, the question you got to ask is, how much credit are you giving them for being 500 because of the fact that 70% of their wins at this point in time in the season are against garbage teams? You can't just come out here and say that the Detroit Tigers are a great team, but the schedule that's been put in front of them has shown that there's a lot of bad teams in Major League Baseball. The division is terrible, and we can make some judgments and say, look, we can be excited for the Tigers, but also we can survey the landscape and say, wow, across Major League Baseball, there are a lot more teams that are garbage than even maybe we thought of. And you know what? If you're playing a garbage team, go out there and destroy them. And at this point in time, they have done that. So for me, I give them all credit because you still have to go out there and win. It's not something that's easy to do. And to be one game under 500 at this point in time is amazing. And it just ups my hope level, just a little bit more. Not like to the roof where I think they're going to contend for a title. But if they can continue this into July, my hope might be raised to the point where I could say they could take this garbage division. Why not the Tigers?
But you've said it yourself that if we are this good, they should be buyers come the trade deadline. That these guys that we are getting all of our hopes up about, Jemmer Candelario and Mikey Fires, they're all going to be gone. We're going to trade them away for pieces.
That might not necessarily be the case. Because, Jason, what if the team is like 8 games over 500 in July? Do you decimate the roster? These are the problems that Al Avila's got to wrestle with because of the fact that he probably thought, okay, the decision to sell will be an easy one. It won't take much effort to decide to blow this up. But if the team, in 2 weeks goes 10-2 and you continue to have a good interleague portion of the season, he's going to have a difficult time because you say, wow, man, this team could have gotten to the postseason under these circumstances. So that's the tough part is...
Yes, but this is where we need to have a strong manager. We need to have a strong general manager in Al Avila. He needs to stay the course. We know that this is a rebuild. And if there's a possibility for him to get as much as he can for these players, regardless of where we are, we need to rebuild this team. Yeah, let's say we're 8 games over 500 and we decide that, hey, you know what? Maybe we'll give this a go. And maybe we do. out of nowhere win the Central Division. But do we really have any faith that they're going to do anything in the postseason? Because that's what I don't see. I don't see this team having enough to go through the postseason and, I mean, let alone get to the World Series, but actually win the World Series. I just feel like there's more talent out there. There's other teams who will just be able to just pound on us. And when we lose at that point, when we've lost the most potential in the players that are doing good, we'll be right back where we started.
So what are you saying? Are you saying that you're not excited, you're not looking at this as anything big because you already knew it? Or are you saying, you know what, just wait and see, the bottom's going to fall out anyway? What are you saying?
I'm not saying that the bottom's going to fall out. I think the bottom will fall out at some point, and they'll, again, I've said it. I can only repeat myself so many times. It's a roller coaster. Mm-hmm. This team is a roller coaster, and I think they have enough talent on the roster that they can beat the teams that they should be beating, but they don't have the talent at this point, and I don't think they'll even have enough talent this year in trades or anything to be able to really compete in the postseason, which that's the ultimate goal. I want them to be able to go into the postseason and win and get to a World Series and just finish the job. I don't think we're going to do that with this roster, and that's why I would much prefer them, if they are overperforming in July, to maximize, get what you can, stockpile draft picks, get a ton of prospects, do what the Astros did, do what the Cubs did, and finally get enough talent to be able to bring guys up and really make some moves in the Major League Baseball.
Now, before we go forward with this discussion, because I am definitely having a lot of hope for this team, it's exciting to watch. You said something that was funny to me because of the fact that you had said that you might be potentially interested in a Rally Goose t-shirt, correct?
Yes,
and you
course.
think, yes, you might be interested in it, right? You might want to go and check out an entity that might be selling it?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I was referring to. I gave you a softball there, John.
Oh, did you? Okay.
I lobbed it over to you because I couldn't think of it. And I was like, John, here's the softball. Crank it out of the park. And you just skimmed right past it.
No, because my first thought was, legitimately, he doesn't know that Detroit Sports Podcast is selling a Rally Goose t-shirt.
Dude, you completely whiffed on that one.
I did whiff. Well, I first, because I'm a skeptical guy, I said to myself, wait a minute, does he not know that I'm promoting it on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast? You can find a Rally Goose t-shirt, nice bright orange, #Rally Goose. A couple people have actually bought it, which is really amazing to look at the fact that we can have an idea. And we put it out there first. We were the first entity before the Detroit Tigers, before the t-shirt places. We put out a Rally Goose t-shirt, and I think one website maybe had done it first, but we were one of the first major entities to go out there and try to put it out there. So if you want one, #Rally Goose. I know we talked about it, and I know you're just kind of thinking it's a little bit gimmicky and stuff like that, but I think it's fun. Something to rally around.
I have no problem with the Rally Goose. I love the Rally Goose, love the Rally Squirrel. Anything rally, I'll get behind.
We're going to definitely revisit the topic of what level of success the Tigers can have and how much credit you want to give them. But I do want to bring this up as well because people are talking about it. Back in the day, obviously, the Detroit Tigers went through a transition when they moved on from Jim Leyland, when his time was up and it was time to take the next step. And by and large, people are saying, look, the decision to bring on Brad Ausmus probably cost the franchise a World Series chance. Do you subscribe to the notion that maybe if Ron Gardenhire was managing the big-time talent and the $200 million payroll, that if it was at that time 4 or 5 years ago and names of managers are starting to surface, are you starting to go, man, what would have happened if Ron Gardenhire would have been brought to the Tigers? Would they have bought in? Would it have been at College Field? Because the comparison is not really the same. It's not fair to Brad Ausmus to say, hey, you sucked and it was your fault that they didn't win because of the fact the roster's different. I think Ron Gardenhire's forced to kind of have this, laid back attitude, have fun, because there's no expectation. I don't even know if he might have acted the same way if he's got a slew of veterans going out there. I think maybe with veterans, you want to push them a little bit to get more out of them. With young cats, you want to keep it light, have steady progress. But how are you going to have fun with Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer, JD Martinez, and the like? How are you going to laugh it up with them? We're kind of really harping on Brad Ausmus. Now, he did a bad job. We all know it. But it's definitely tough to say that Ron Gardenhire would have won a World Series with the veterans, because his playoff record's terrible and everybody's noted it.
Yeah, it's really hard to play the what if game, but if we're going to go down that road, when Leland when he retired, Ron Gardenhire he's always been a manager that I always had eyes on, and even though he doesn't have that playoff record, he always got it done in the regular season, and that's kind of what he's doing here right now. So would he have gotten them a World Series championship? I'm not sure. Do I think there was a better shot that he may have just given them another chance at a World Series? I think that's more of a probability. I think he probably could have came in and kind of had that same feel of Jim Leland, had the respect of the players. We may not be talking about a World Series victory, but we could be talking like, hey, at least we got another shot at the title, and maybe we're not in this gigantic rebuild mode at this point.
My opinion would be, I don't think so. I think he might have maybe won a round. I think he could have gotten farther than Brad Ausmus just based on the record that he had. And some will argue, too. You could make the argument that, look, in Minnesota, he had Justin Morneau, he had Joe Nathan when he was in his prime and pitching and the elite closer that he was at the time. But that's different than when you come over to the Detroit Tigers and you had the combination of David Price, Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander, JD Martinez. I feel like the Tigers were better than Minnesota, and Minnesota got to the postseason, but the Tigers had opportunities to close the deal, win it all. I feel like Minnesota definitely had talent, and they did some things, but the Tigers' talent was better, and I feel like they would have gotten some success.
The Twins' talent was good, and they had those players who could really kill you. The Morneaus, the catcher who was huge and probably one of the best players in a while. I can't think of his name right now. Yeah, if he would have came here, he would have had an immense amount of talent. He would have had a ownership that was still handing millions and millions of dollars out to high end free agents, and it would have been interesting to see what would have happened, what he could have done in an organization that was doing everything they could to win a World Series.
Yeah, it's fun to talk about, and people are starting to get a little bit more and more mad at Brad Ausmus because of the fact that Ron Gardenhire probably is a better manager than Brad Ausmus, and you can say that. And
how many years? He has a ton of years, though, on Brad Ausmus. Exactly. Who knows, Brad Ausmus in 20 years may be a great manager.
Well, I would disagree with that. I feel like he's more...
I know it's a stretch.
Yeah.
After his epic failure with the Tigers, but if he would have worked his way up a little bit more, I think when we did make that Brad Ausmus hire, we saw what was happening in Boston and in St. Louis with them hiring rookie managers and having immediate success.
It's funny, just a quick sidebar. It's funny when you have a Twitter account and you get to the level where all the burner accounts follow you and the funny names that follow you this week. So guess who tweeted us his list of top 3 Detroit Lions? The Tom Gores burner account has just followed us. And then on Sunday, on Father's Day, an account that was dedicated to appreciating Henrik Zetterberg followed us. So I like the fact that we're on the list of all the burner accounts and the fake accounts. We get followed by all of them, and it's really great. There's a fake Ron Gardenhire account. There's a fake Al Avila account. They all seem to be in their wave, is what most people do, it seems like, from the trolls, is they start an account and they go through and they follow a whole bunch of people related to Detroit sports. And I'm in the mix. It's really great at Detroit Podcast. So the Tom Gores burner account gets in. It's kind of funny. But getting back to Ron Gardenhire and the Detroit Tigers, we got to give him credit. I think that what he's done, he's tapped into something that he can ride out the rest of the way for the season, which is have fun, be loose, just go out there and bust your butt and try your hardest, which is a Jim Leland mantra. It's really cool. It's really awesome to see a team that nobody had expectations for, and they're saying, look, we're just going out here, we're playing for each other, and we're having a good time, and it's really fun to be able to peek into it. And so here's the tough part, okay, to get back to the expectations for the Tigers. You said it yourself. Your expectation was around 81 wins. Well, what's changed is now the division could be won with 87 wins. If the Cleveland Indians don't continue to succeed and they maybe tail off, which maybe you will say and others that follow us and listen will say, that's not going to happen. 90-95 is going to have to take the division. But if it doesn't, let's say around the neighborhood of 87 to 90 wins takes the division, and you could just trade off one piece, one of those pitchers. You got 6 of them. If you just add 2 more players and just say, look, we are going to definitely rebuild. Here's the notion I want to tell everybody. The Tigers have rebuilt. Okay, they have. They've gotten rid of extremely large contracts. They're playing guys that they're evaluating, and maybe some of them will stay, maybe some of them won't. But the Tigers have rebuilt. This is not a team.
It's not over, though.
It's not over. The variable that's changed is these players, this mix could be special. And if you just add 1 or 2 pieces, if you don't sacrifice, what I'm saying is you're not going to go out and get a number 1 on a bad team. But if you trade off, one of the prospects and get a number 2 or a 3 from another organization, and you're able to maybe be in the hunt, I would say when you buy light, buy at a discount price. Go out and get 2 pieces. That's it. 1 more bullpen arm and 1 more positional player that can be consistent and maybe a utility guy and a guy that can put the ball in play consistently. And maybe that can be just achieved by 1 move, trading Jose Iglesias. You make 1 move if you're going to sell. Trade Jose Iglesias for 2 people, second or third starting pitcher and a reliable bullpen arm, or somebody else to fill his position. But if a couple guys can step up, then you have the opportunity to go out there and potentially improve this team and maybe even win the division. It can happen. It was a further away idea 6 weeks ago than it is now.
Absolutely. And, if they do roller coaster again and they dip, 5 to 10 games below 500, what will we be saying at that point? I'm just not sure what's going to happen with this team. Under your scenarios, I'm going to just have to wait and see what Al Avila can actually do then. Is he going to make a move? Can he get what we actually need without sacrificing too much? And I have to stay with my wait and see approach at that point.
Okay, so you're still wait and see. You still think that 87 wins might not win the division. You don't think adding to this would be the proper recipe to rebuild.
I think 87 wins may win the division. I just don't have faith in the Tigers getting to 87 wins.
Oh, man, Jason, the league is so bad. You're going to play, look, you've just now finished half of the games.
The league is so bad, but they're also bad.
Nah, Jason, I think you're underestimating it. I think the Tigers are better than what you give them credit for. I really do. You look at the strengths of the Tigers, okay? Castellanos is becoming the hitter. His biggest weakness is in the outfield, his defense. But they're winning despite the fact he's terrible. It's not causing a massive issue, his play. Now, is he giving up runs? Is he giving up extra bases? Yes, it's not ideal. It's not championship quality. But are they hitting enough? Are they pitching enough? Yes. And then also, too, now when guys come back, remember, when we were evaluating earlier in the year, Jordan Zimmerman was out, a rash of injuries. You had guys that were not slotted. Candelario was out. Now they're back. Blaine Hardy, the Tigers are considering a 6-man rotation because of the fact that Blaine Hardy's come back, Zimmerman's come back. Now Zimmerman's going to be the odd man out. He's going to be the disaster. He's going to be the one that is going to force his way out based on his play. But with a healthy roster, Fires, Lariano, Fulmer, if he gets back into rhythm, I feel like you're underestimating how good this Detroit Tigers team can be. And I feel like you're missing out on our story that could be one for the ages. This could be the biggest story of all time. If this team gets to the postseason and wins a round, come on, Jason, you could be missing.
If that happens, we're just going to have to agree to disagree because you say I'm underestimating. I say you're overestimating. I think it's gonna play out the way that I say it, that it's going to, that these guys are going to wow you at time, but for the most part, they're going to be just average. And that's, I mean, when has Fires and Liriano and Zimmerman ever been, above average and, really giving you great baseball? And I just don't see that happening at the end of the season.
You don't see it, huh? Can't convince you yet. Well, they're playing Cincinnati. Now they're playing the interleague portion of their schedule, so stay tuned. I do think that there's an opportunity for you to get on board fully and really realize the potential of this team. And I would say this. It is worthy to look at this Detroit Tigers team from a different lens, which is if you added to it just a little bit without giving up too much. Look, one position player, maybe one prospect, just 2 players. Do you think it's worth it to go from 81 to 87 wins? Most people are going to say no. Just, continue the rebuild with guys that you think can sustain, a level of play with different guys. And I think that what they're looking for, I think you're right. I think the plan of what's actually going to happen is they're just trying to decide 5 or 6 guys that are playing currently that they want to keep, and the rest of the talent is probably going to look to be moved on from, whether it be Fulmer, Boyd, Mike Fires, Lariano, Nick Castellanos. They're going to be looking at a bunch of guys that they're going to want to move on from. And so keeping it together is going to be harder because I think collectively when you move all these pieces, you can get a bunch of young prospects at a cheaper price. That's the hardest thing is that, the Tigers roster right now could really blow up a rebuild if they keep winning. And that's the hardest part to acknowledge is that winning is not really making things better. It's making it tougher to decide, but it's a good problem to have. I think it's really great in an effort to, handle business and things like that. So it's
nice as a fan, but it's not nice, not so nice when you're actually
trying to look
get
at
somewhere.
Okay.
In the future.
Okay, then I would ask you this. The end game of a rebuild is a consistent, solid 25-man roster that you can go out there and compete with year in, year out, right?
Correct.
Are you starting to look at some of the pieces that you think you want there? Is it Castellanos?
I think there are some pieces. I'm not going to deny that. And I know we've talked that a lot of the pieces that we do like are probably the ones that you're going to have to give up, which, I like a Nico Goodrum. I like Castellanos. I like Fires even, but those are the pieces that get talked about that they're doing good on a rebuilding team. So they're the ones who are going to be out of here.
It's tough to evaluate too because the name now that most people are talking about is Nick Castellanos. Real quickly right now, I'll just go with keep him or trade him. Matt Boyd.
Trade.
Nick Castellanos.
Keep.
Mike Fires.
Trade.
Lariano.
I like Lariano, but he's a guy, he bounces around. I would keep him.
Jose Iglesias.
Trade that guy.
I think the first domino will be Boyd. I think if he keeps it up, I think a good team's going to come calling, and the offer might be juicy. So I think Boyd will be the first domino, and then we'll decide to see around July. But still early to see. But if you're telling me right now, I would say that Boyd and Castellanos probably will not be on the team after July.
Okay.
All right.
We'll have to see.
All right, we'll see. Good talk, man.
Next week, are they going to be under or over 500?
They'll be at 500.
At 500?
They'll be at 500.
I'm going to go stick with the under 500.
All right, let's take our first time out. We'll come back, and we'll debate some Detroit Lions topics. The Free Press has the greatest of all time bracket, and I want to get your sense because people are kind of filtering in on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast. Their top 3 Detroit Lions. I'll talk to Jason and to get a sense of where actually, to talk about it, where does Matthew Stafford rank all time in terms of Detroit Lions history? Some people are way overvaluing them, but at this point in time, the tweets coming in kind of have them slotted at a certain position. Stay tuned. We'll tell you where you guys think Stafford ranks among the all-time greats of Detroit Lions. Stay with us. Jason, I want to tell you about our host site, Podomatic.com. Up until this point in time, we've recorded over 1,000 podcasts on the network. We've only used one host site. Why do we use Podomatic? Super quick, easy to use. When we record great audio, have great debates about the Detroit Tigers, and now upcoming about the Detroit Lions, we take our audio and upload it quickly to Podomatic. That's how we've been able to grow the network, have great guests on. When we're done with recording, we upload the audio real quick, and all our listeners across the United States and even overseas can find it. So if you're looking to start a brand new project, a brand new podcast, then all the hosts here on the network, we're going to recommend one host site and one host site alone, Podomatic.com.
I was trying to get it how I live. I want them dead presidents. I want to pull up, head spin, get fly. I got 6 jobs. I don't get tired. I don't get tired.
Motor City Sports Detroit Sports Podcast Network. John always pots down the wrong pot at this point in the podcast. But, it's okay. He didn't get a degree in this.
Exactly. The channels are always hard, and I don't pay attention to it. Plus, the World Cup is on. I'm excited. I'm like, oh, man, shoot, we went a little bit over on the segment. We should be done by 3 minutes, but we still got like 15 minutes to talk. So, hey, it happens, man. But you would say the show, when you listen from time to time, does sound well-produced at the end of it, right?
Of course.
Yes.
I feel like any podcast that comes out on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network always sounds professional. And, there's tons of podcasts out there nowadays. The thing that immediately turns me off is the quality. You listen and it sounds like they're either sharing a mic or they're on really low quality. Come on, man. Come on. I need a drop there for you that just is just like, you need to be put in timeout. Maybe I should just turn down your mic so it's just me. But anyways, low quality, either it's only one mic or they're recording on like a snowball mic or even a lesser quality than that.
Right. The snowball mics, man. Down with the snowball. That's the easy advice from the king is don't use the snowball. No, it just sounds distant, right?
It's easy. And if you are really truly just getting into it and you're trying to put together something, then yeah, I'm not going to knock you for it. But if you do want to step up your game and be a little bit more quality, then you gotta put a little bit of money into it. And that's what we've done here.
Exactly. Put a little bit of money into it. And that's exactly right. And I think it's fair to say that, you know what, it's hard to get into podcasting like anything else. But if you do a good job, you're passionate about it, and you establish a good quality reputation, a lot of repetition, then you can be successful. And I think that, maybe Vito and I and the network will also continue to do some teaching as well down the road and maybe help people out in terms of how to podcast. Talking about the Detroit Lions to finish the podcast, a lot of people are debating now in the offseason. They're talking about, okay, where do some of the Detroit Lions rank in terms of where they are in the NFL, how the cornerbacks are going to look, how the quarterback is, the Lions offense, defense, how it's going to shape up. But the Detroit Free Press has started a greatest of all time in each league, in each sport. And one of the surprises early on was people voted Matt Stafford as being better than Joe Schmidt, a longtime Detroit Lion. And people have constantly debated whether Stafford will be successful and things like that. But the question I got to ask you, and the main point of this discussion is Matt Stafford the greatest at this point in time with no playoff wins, no Super Bowl rings? Is he right now, in terms of the numbers he's put up, the greatest Detroit Lion of all time?
Absolutely not. I wish at some point I could say that Matt Stafford will be the greatest Lion of all time. But if we're talking this moment in time right now, Matthew Stafford is not the greatest Lion. It's hands down Barry Sanders. Barry Sanders is the greatest running back of all time, let alone the greatest Lion of all time right now. And really what it's going to take for Stafford to get to that next level and be the greatest Lion of all time is it's really Super Bowl or bust. He's got to go out there and actually win a Super Bowl. It would be great to just say, get to a Super Bowl and have some prolonged success. But at this point, if you're actually talking, you want to be known as the greatest Lion of all time. If he were to go out there and win a Super Bowl, it would be kind of hard. Then he's in that argument because everybody knows quarterbacks they get the majority of the praise when teams succeed. They get a lot of the fault though when they don't win. So I think that's why there are so many detractors on Matt Stafford right now. But if he does eventually go out and delivers Detroit a Super Bowl victory, he will be immortal in this town, and he's going to be right up there with Barry Sanders.
So why do you think those people who say that Stafford is the greatest of all time right now, why do you think they put him in that category of the GOAT right now?
I would like to give you some factual reason why they think that. And I don't think I can really give you any solid facts as to why those people think that. But what I can say is that these are fans that have been starving for a great quarterback. And Matt Stafford, he is arguably the best quarterback we've had in the last 20, 30 years. He's the best Lions quarterback in my time. If I try to rank the quarterbacks that I've seen play for the Lions, Matt Stafford's number one. And then it's such a mishmash after that. I think as much as people might hate him, Scott Mitchell would probably be after that. Guys like John Kitna and just players who get some modicum of success for this team. But Matt Stafford has been the biggest hope for this franchise. And I think that's why they look at him and they see him as one of the best and greatest of all time for the Lions. I honestly don't know. I'd like to talk to these people because to actually say that Matthew Stafford is a better Lion than Barry Sanders is just ridiculous. I mean, the only argument that you could have is that, neither of them really have the ultimate playoff success as a Super Bowl victory, and that the quarterback may be more important than the running back. But Barry Sanders, by far, I mean, the skill that he had, if he was on the Dallas Cowboys, if the roles were reversed and it was Emmitt Smith on the Lions and Barry Sanders on the Cowboys, Barry Sanders would be hands down the greatest running back of all time. We wouldn't be talking about Walter Payton. We wouldn't talk about Emmitt Smith. It would be Barry Sanders is the greatest of all time.
Yeah, see, right now a lot of people are messaging us their top 3, and they do have some recency effect in that they go number 1, Barry, 2, Calvin, 3, Stafford is what the Tom Gore's burner account sent us. And some people are disagreeing with the notion that Stafford is the greatest of all time. Adam Mangold gets in. He says, as of today, no. People are saying, put the liquor down, Doc. Stafford's not in the top 3, but definitely in the top 5. And I do think part of it is the success of. Part of it is due to the lack of success in the playoffs. You're absolutely right.
And me being a guy who really likes Matthew Stafford, I even have a hard time putting him in the top 5. I do think I want to say in that Free Press poll, he was actually 15th, I think. And I think that's too low for him. I think he's somewhere around the top 10. You might even be talking about an 8 or 9 seed. But
now to poke holes in your Barry Sanders theory, do you remember the -1 game, I believe, versus Green Bay? Do you recall that in the postseason? Now, look, during the regular season, he's put up great yards. He obviously was that running back that we all remember that would go -2, 4, -6, 69 yards, and then he would just have these breakout runs that were exciting. But in terms of playoff success, when it came down to it, I think people that make excuses for Barry Sanders will say, well, the line just wasn't good enough in some of those performances. But when it came down to crunch time, it would lend for some debate to say that Barry didn't show up either in the postseason. He barely did anything either. I mean, he was part of the team that won the one.
I agree. I said that neither of them had if somebody who did want to put Stafford ahead of Barry Sanders, that would be one of the arguments, is that neither of them really had much playoff success. But what I'll also counter with is Stafford's role it's much bigger. And it's magnified more because he's supposed to be the leader, the head of that team. He's the quarterback, where Barry Sanders, he was a running back. I mean, I'm not trying to lessen what he did, but in the grand scheme of things, running backs, they do get replaced.
So if it's not Barry Sanders and not Matthew Stafford, who else could you argue for to be in the mix in terms of the greatest of all time Detroit Lion, the greatest producer for the Detroit Lions, greatest player?
Calvin Johnson is up in there, and you can say that Stafford had a hand in that as well. But it's a guy who teams have to game plan for, and he was still successful. He has the record for most yards in a season, so he's definitely in that conversation. I think, and outside of that, I think you have to go, beyond what I know of Detroit Lions. Just looking at some of the people that are on this list, Chris Spielman he was a great linebacker,
defeated by Barry Sanders to advance.
But I believe that because Barry Sanders, he was bigger than that. You want to go? You're talking about Lem Barney and Bobby Lane, Alex Karras. I mean, these are greats that I know and I've heard about, but I don't have the experience of actually seeing them.
Realistically, I think I see that Jason Hansen was defeated by Calvin Johnson, but Jason Hansen, number 14, do you think that's an appropriate spot for a kicker who scored a lot of points and had moments for the Detroit Lions? I mean, he did put points on the board, and he was basically the guy for a while. Do you think 14 was the proper seating for him in this tournament?
Yes. And Jason Hansen shouldn't even be in this discussion. I love you, Jason Hansen, and I wish you were still playing for the Lions, but you have no right no kicker should have the right to be on any list for greatest of any team. It's just ridiculous.
And for those
Adam Vinatieri is it Vinatieri, the guy who kicked it for the Patriots in that snow game? I don't care. You're still a kicker. You're a kicker. That's your one job. That's your only job. You're not the greatest player of all time.
Exactly. Dennis Sobel gets in, Bobby Lane, Night Train Lane, and Barry Sanders as his top 3. And to represent for the older listeners, a lot of people remember definitely Chris Spielman, Doak Walker. They remember Bobby Lane. They remember Dick Night Train Lane. They remember Joe Schmidt. And those are guys that are in the conversation as well. And a lot of people definitely are having that debate. Team Fastpad gets in Barry Sanders, then Chris Spielman, number 2. So a lot of people do think that Barry Sanders and Chris Spielman are up there as well. Chris Spielman, I think, is underrated. I think that I think in terms of being a linebacker, he gave a lot of great performances, and an attitude, I think, is one that kind of fit perfectly with Detroit. Chris Spielman being here was just rugged, and he just had that kind of look of a thumper, a guy that was really solid. And I think for Detroit Lions, I think the hardcore fan, now some people are starting to turn and go, yeah, the quarterback is good, but I think for Detroit to have a solid identity, the guy that takes over the team should be a linebacker. Should be the Jared Davises. Should be the guys that are thumpers.
Nice.
It'd be nice, wouldn't it? Because it represents football, smashing people, hitting people,
I think Chris
stopping offenses.
Had the leadership side of that. I think Chris Spielman was a great leader. And he was a really good player. I just didn't see him as like that next level linebacker. Like when I think of that, leader who's also an amazing player, I automatically go to Brian Urlacher. When he was with the Bears, that he was just unstoppable on that team. I think of Clay Matthews on the Packers nowadays, that these are guys, they're leaders, but they have that next level. And I think Chris Spielman was really good, but I'm not sure if he was greatest, in that, conversation.
Okay, good talk. See, Jason, how good it is to kind of just talk about sports in a way. And I know we always say, well, you came in and Vito said it, Adam has said it, and now you've said it. So all three of the people who sit in the chair across from me have said, well, there's not really much to talk about. And then we've had great conversations. You know why? Because you guys are all working with a great sports executive producer, and that's me. And that I can sit down and have great topics that get engagement, and that's what it's all about. And I will disagree with all of you guys. There is great stuff to talk about in terms of rankings, and we're going to finish this podcast with some quick hitters too. A couple things I've observed in the world of sports that I want to get your thoughts on. Major violation what Phil Mickelson did at the Open, or just move on? Who cares? It's a penalty. No one cares about his legacy based on hitting the golf ball when it's rolling away from the hole.
Just move on. This is Phil Mickelson. He's known as kind of just that, guy who's he kind of looks like us, but he's really good at the game.
Kawhi Leonard, is it bad to say that he wants to leave the San Antonio Spurs and go maybe to the Lakers, or you say, you know what, let's let this play out. Maybe he ends up staying with San Antonio. Maybe he's just grumpy.
I think he needs to get out of San Antonio. And
where should he end up?
I am all for the talks of making the super team, the Kawhi Leonard, LeBron James, and Paul George in LA. I think it'd be interesting. I'm just fascinated to see super teams play.
Oh, we just saw a goal for England, and that's the way it's supposed to be. A lot of people think it's going to be a blowout anyway. So live goal as we're recording the podcast. England on the board. Yes, sir. All right, last thing I'll ask you about. Do you have a team besides the United States in the World Cup? Anybody you're rooting for? I'm obviously an England-Spain guy. It's fun to kind of poke the people that are playing the opposite. I love the fact that Mexico beat Germany. Shout out to Kenny. Germany lost. That's awesome. But it's a fun time to watch the World Cup, man. If you're a soccer fan, this is a great time. You got a team that you're rooting for?
I'm always a fan of England. I like Portugal because I like Cristiano Ronaldo. I love Brazil too, just because these are the powerhouse teams. But I'll probably root for England, though.
Yeah, all right.
I mean, why not?
You ever go out to Royal Oak to watch soccer? I think we'll invite you. I'm going to throw you an invite because me and the fellas get out, we watch, we cheer. Right now it's early round, so it's still group play, early game one action. So yeah. It's still developing points, but losing is bad. Losing is bad. Hey, 2026, you excited? Maybe make a trip to watch a game or two?
Depending on where it's going to be, because I read, I think the closest is Cincinnati and Toronto.
Yep.
Are they going to be in Chicago?
I think that the teams have listed on the map. We've put it on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast, but it's still in development because some teams that if they have soccer-specific stadiums, the problem is Detroit won't because we don't have an outdoor stadium.
I get that, but I would,
it could be Chicago, could be definitely a place, but I think right now, as of now, I'm not exactly sure. I think that was one of the big omissions that people said was maybe Chicago's not one of the places.
Right, and I'd probably make an effort to try and get a ticket to that, but It's going to be fun, 2026. It's a long ways away, though. 8 years.
Great edition of the Motor City Sports Rant, episode 157 in the books. Thank you so much, Jason. I appreciate your time, always coming in here. Dedicated podcaster. Definitely you're a great broadcaster as well. You can follow Jason on Twitter at Jarvie the King. You can follow the network. If anything that we've said, if the video that Jason put out upset you, follow us. Message back at Detroit Podcast. Jason, to recap, does not think that the Tigers are going anywhere. He thinks, hey, they're 500 and let's continue the rebuild. And he thinks that Stafford is not the greatest of all time. He gives it 2. Barry Sanders. Feel free, message us anytime, 24/7, good or bad. We read it. At Detroit Podcast, at Jarvie the King. Thanks for listening to the Motor City Sports Rant. We'll be back next Tuesday.
Later.
Okay, nice idiot. You. Bye-bye.
Good day, sir. I said good day.
All right. Take care now. Bye-bye then.
Loser.